Okay. Do you want to just start by introducing yourself, who you are, where you work and stuff?
My name is Ryan Davey. I'm a marketing and tech guru at Unicorn Business Solutions.
So, g'day to everybody listening. My name's Dan Beck. So, I am a director of an accounting firm called Power Tynan and a director of an analytics firm called PT 2.0.
Daniel Hardy, work at Cabio Partners. I'm the head of our digital management accounting team.
So my name is Matt Sheld. I'm one of the partners at Advise Accountants based in Bathurst, New South Wales.
So I want to start off with something that most firms face is a traditional accounting firm. So we've got 15,000 accounting firms in Australia alone. And the traditional firm, why do you think it's so hard for a traditional firm to implement Microsoft Power BI?
I think it's hard for people to implement Power BI because they don't fundamentally understand what it is. Okay. What a lot of people see it is as a reporting platform. And what I try and communicate and explain to people is that it's more like Excel 2.0. Okay, so it's actually an evolution of reporting platform, and just a bit like when Excel was released in 1985, somewhere around about that. It took years for it to gain prevalence and people to work out what it actually did. I think Power BI is a little bit the same. Like Power BI officially has been around for like 5 years now. It has been around a little bit longer in terms of some of its functionality inside Excel. But I think that's why firms are finding it hard to implement, is they see it as a reporting platform, not as an actual evolution and extension of Excel and what they do inside Excel. So they've got a short-term view of, I want to do dashboards. Okay. Rather, what I want people to do is to say, actually think Power BI is actually reporting dashboards. That's really one component of it, but it's actually a fantastic analytical tool to actually deliver value to clients and internally around. So I think that short-term view of what Power BI is actually a lot of what makes it hard for firms to implement, because it seems like it only covers off a small part of what they want to do. I think that most people have a short or fixed viewpoint of what Power BI can do. I think they realize what it can actually do for the business. There'd actually be a lot more effort and time spent inside organizations working out that this is to be implemented properly, not just downloaded, start using and hope for the best kind of thing.
So is what you're saying, are you saying that you think like firms are seeing Power BI as the new whiz-bang tool for reporting, and they just think they're just going to plug it in and get even better outcomes than before, rather than it should be looked at as, you're saying it should be looked at as an evolution of Excel, in the sense that you can use it to interact with it, like not just consume it. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So I think this is the thing, is I think that a lot of people use Power BI as a consumption device. And I think a lot of that has actually been borne by the different software vendors that are out there. So yeah, all our different vendors all have their own Power BI reporting packs. Okay. But the problem is that because they're locked down to a particular platform, you're not able to interact with them in terms of plugging in other bits of software, that we've become to know it as something that you just look at to get a result, rather than actually formulate an answer to. So I think that very much it's viewed by a lot of clients, by a lot of firms, as a consumption rather than a production tool. And I guess that's where we want to change people's mindset, is that I personally think that in 5 years' time, we're going to be using Power BI to do things like analyze transactions, do audits, do compilations of different items, more so than just looking at some numbers in a page. We're actually going to drill down and we're going to analyze businesses, not just consume. But to do that, we need to learn some of the tools in Power BI to be able to do that analysis. I'm not talking about necessarily designing reports. I don't think most firms need to learn how to design reports to any great extent, but I think they need to learn how to interact and understand what the data does.
So going back to the question, we're basically, like, what we're seeing is that the majority of firms are not able to implement Power BI. And are you suggesting that it's because they're not understanding how to use it properly? They're trying to just literally plug and play it. Is that what the angle that you're trying to mention in?
Correct. So spot on. I do think that we're treating it as a plug and play. I think that we implement it either internally for inside the organization, or we try and implement it for clients. If we're implementing it for clients, I think that there's a lot more potential, by the way, for implementing for clients for advisory work than there is internal. Get it that most people want to start with internal to learn, and that's cool. That's awesome. Get on that learning train. But the real value comes from using it with clients. Now, if we're using it with clients, it's not just a drag and drop. It's part of a strategy. It's part of an advisory process if we're going to use it for clients. So it's about training up people inside the organization on how to use it. It's about understanding the source of the data. It's about understanding how you're going to have a conversation with people as well. So why I think it's hard to implement something like Power BI is because it's not a plug and play. It's because it needs a strategy and a mindset around it for it to work effectively. And look, of course it can be plug and play, but I think that those who treat it as that don't get the outcomes, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is if you treat it as plug and play, then the best you're going to get is what comes out of the box. And we're advisory firms, we're knowledge workers. Very rarely do you produce the same financial statement for 10 clients. Same thing with this, is there's going to be tweaks and changes that needs to happen to somebody's business. And that's why I don't think it's plug and play, but that's why I think it's also harder to implement, is because we treat it as consumption, not production. Therefore, we don't dedicate resources to it.
Yep.
So implementing Microsoft Power BI without Atani would be, I would imagine, near on impossible. I wouldn't know where to start. I think accountants really don't have that technical and technological understanding of what it is and how you would pull your client Xero data out of Xero into a warehouse, then into a data. We just don't have that knowledge and that skill set.
I would agree with that, Ken. When we decided to go on this journey, we didn't know really a lot of places where to start, but fortunately I had friends at Power Tynan, and they've got their own company called PT2, which is a Power BI division that builds custom reporting for all sizes of clients. We got them into our office and we did some training. I put myself and about 3 or 4 other staff in that training day. Well, it was actually over 2 days, and we're very fortunate to have Jacinta, who works for us, who was just like a duck for water and just picked it up unbelievably well. And that sort of kickstarted our journey, because it is, this program, Cam, to be honest, is not a silver bullet. You have to do the hard work to make it work. But when you do the hard work, you get a better result. I have no doubts about that.
I want to bring up resources. So the difference between somebody just coming to Atani and saying, yep, we're going to sign up for Atani, and you yourself, you're an associate director, and you're going to go, I'm going to do Atani. I mean, talk to us through how feasible that is.
It probably depends on how you run yourself and run your team, and how much you're already growing your existing client base at the moment. It depends how much time you have. If you've got the time to invest into it up front and learn how to, learning Atani is not difficult. Learning how to program effectively in Power BI is complex, and learning how the data model works and the relationships between the data works, and fixing errors and issues that arise as you're trying to do things, that is extremely complex and very, very hard to learn. It's not to say you can't. You could learn it and you could become an expert in it, and people have, but it just depends if that's where you want to be spending your time. If you're already in a role, so you're a director in an accounting firm and you've got clients that you're looking after and managing and being the relationship for, it's going to be very difficult for you to find the time that's required to become an expert in Power BI.
I think this comes back to the silver bullet thing that we've talked about previously. And as I've said to you, silver bullet to me always is synonymous with quick fix. Okay. Somebody wants a silver bullet because it's going to take time and effort to actually do this. So resourcing comes in many forms. Resourcing comes from either building your own knowledge, building the knowledge of a team member, or engaging someone as a third party to help you with the journey. Okay. I am a massive, massive believer that accountants are poised in this area to become Power BI experts. Okay. Especially around data advisory. because we've already got the skills that makes a good data advisor, right? All we're trying to do here is mean that you don't need to have such a propeller head to be able to operate it. Okay, so the skills that an accountant has are things like the ability to problem solve, the ability to communicate. Okay, and that's probably one of the key ones in this whole thing is, and this is why advisor is taking so long to implement inside firms everywhere, is that we need to use that communication paradigm as much in Power BI as it is with advisory. Power BI is just another form of advisory that's data driven. So I think that we actually need to build resources in multiple areas. I think that the organizational sponsor or head actually needs to, once they see Power BI, is actually invest a little bit of time into understanding it, not learning it, understanding it. And probably one of the people that I always go and use as a practical example to this is Matt. So Matt, if you asked him to build, so I'm talking, and maybe might edit this out depending if Matt says it's okay or not. So Matt Sherwood of Advise Accountants. He originally, when we started with him on a Power BI journey, Matt doesn't know how to build a report, right? Wouldn't know how to. He couldn't add a visualization to a report, but he's got a team that helps him do that. So Matt understands what his client needs, understands what needs to be delivered. He knows how to communicate to the client and build that rapport and that advisory. He has got a team around him internally and externally that helps deliver solutions. So I think that what people first see is they see Power BI looks awesome. They then go and say, I want to implement this into my business. I think they miss two things. One is a strategy around how they're going to use it internally and for clients. And number two is actually building up the support mechanism around it. So like any skill, Power BI takes time to learn how to use. It then takes more time to become an expert in it. And unless you're a sole trader or a one-man band, or everyone else is just purely focused on accounting, you actually need a team around you, not to learn. Like, I'm not talking about you need a whole team of Power BI people and that's all they do. Like, you need a team of people who understand and can use Power BI to help you implement your ideas. Okay, so if we can actually start with things like templates and things like that. Templates, once again, aren't a silver bullet. They're something there to shortcut the journey. Okay, they still require implementation, they require support, they require vision, and they require an advisory skill around them.
I think if you're an accounting firm looking to go into this space, then you should be looking at it from a strategic point of view straight up, as opposed to, we think this is a quick win sort of view. We say, all right, this is the demand from our clients. We know that our clients are asking for information around, we're not making a profit. Why is it? They might have their suspicions and that sort of thing. Instead, they should say, well, okay, we have this demand, or we can produce these reports, which we have a good indication that people will buy in whatever format or whatever model that you come up with. Then, like any kind of service that you're putting out, you then need to properly resource it. And you also need to, I guess, maintain some focus on it. I think from our perspective, or from or the conversations I've had with various accounting firms over the years, we all catch up at Xerocon if nothing else, although maybe not in the last few years, is that while they're really interested in additional services and got moving beyond compliance, their focus isn't really in it. I find often their heart isn't in it. And you can tell the firms that have had success with it is that they've had a partner or a director or someone senior who thinks, this is my baby and I really want to push it. Whereas the rest of them are just saying this is an add-on service. If you're looking at it as a quick win as an add-on service, I don't think that's the way you want to go. And instead, you should probably looking at partnering with someone who does this analytics to produce those models for you, and then maybe you have the conversation with clients. So as long as you understand the reports, then that's kind of your quick win there.
Another area that I touched on with the difficulty here is the director and the partner not really understanding what is possible in data analytics. I mean, how much of a play do you think that, I mean, that sort of interlocks with the lack of vision because you don't know, what's possible?
I think this comes back to the silver bullet thing that we've talked about previously. And as I've said to you, silver bullet to me always is synonymous with quick fix. Okay. Somebody wants a silver bullet because it's going to take time and effort to actually do this. So resourcing comes in many forms. Resourcing comes from either building your own knowledge, building the knowledge of a team member, or engaging someone as a third party to help you with the journey. Okay. I am a massive, massive believer that accountants are poised in this area to become Power BI experts, okay, especially around data advisory, because we've already got the skills that makes a good data advisor, right? All we're trying to do here is mean that you don't need to have such a propeller head to be able to operate it, okay? So the skills that an accountant has are things like the ability to problem solve, the ability to communicate, okay? And that's probably one of the key ones in this whole thing and this is why advisor is taking so long to implement inside firms everywhere, is that we need to use that communication paradigm as much in Power BI as it is with advisory. Power BI is just another form of advisory that's data driven. So I think that we actually need to build resources in multiple areas. I think that the organizational sponsor or head actually needs to, once they see Power BI, is actually invest a little bit of time into understanding it, not learning it, understanding it. And probably one of the people that I always go and use as a practical example to this is Matt. So Matt, if you asked him to build, so I'm talking, and maybe might edit this out depending if Matt says it's okay or not. So Matt's Matt Sherwood of Advise Accountants. He originally, when we started with him on a Power BI journey, Matt doesn't know how to build a report, right? Wouldn't know how to. He couldn't add a visualization to a report, but he's got a team that helps him do that. So Matt understands what his client needs, understands what needs to be delivered. He knows how to communicate to the client and build that rapport and that advisory. He has got a team around him, internally and externally, that helps deliver solutions. So I think that what people first see is they see Power BI looks awesome. They then go and say, I want to implement this into my business. I think they miss two things. One is a strategy around how they're going to use it internally and for clients. And number two is actually building up the support mechanism around it. So like any skill, Power BI takes time to learn how to use. It then takes more time to become an expert in it. And unless you're a sole trader or a one-man band, or everyone else is just purely focused on accounting, you actually need a team around you, not to learn. Like, I'm not talking about you need a whole team of Power BI people and that's all they do. Like, you need a team of people who understand and can use Power BI to help you implement your ideas. Okay, so if we can actually start with things like templates and things like that. Templates, once again, aren't a silver bullet. They're something there to shortcut the journey. Okay, they still require implementation, they require support, they require vision, and they require an advisory skill around them.
Right.
Look, absolutely. I think that just like any kind of business is you're trying to align yourself with people who, number one, can offer you a complete service. So therefore, you're dealing with one person, one key contact point. But I think that there's also a bit of technology is changing so rapidly across every industry out there. Knowing that you've got a partner that's actually looking at this kind of stuff, that's executing in this area. We've actually sat in with a few firms where we've actually sat with them as they've pitched to new clients to go and say, hey, we have data analytics. Now, they might not have a formal data analytics team, but they've partnered with, say, My Business to then go and say, hey, actually, we want to talk to this client, and we understand that this is going to make us different to everyone else who's pitching the exact same. I'm offering you advisory to do your tax returns, your super fund, everything else like that. So I think it does offer a point of differentiation. What my concern is that firms that don't start actually embracing these services is it's going to be a deficiency in services in years to come. That if you're not doing this kind of thing, then you'll actually take a backward step. So you'll get a negative mark rather than at the moment, if you're doing it, you're getting a +1 against your services. So that's, I guess, why I try and encourage firms to explore this area, because we know that the larger firms are actually getting involved in this space, and it is becoming a little bit of a differentiator at the moment. But as I said before, size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? You can be small, you can be big. And this kind of stuff that we were doing using different tools than Power BI used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to operate. And in medium to large enterprises, this kind of analysis has been available. It's just that now we can offer it to clients at a very affordable price.
Mhm.
The gateway, honestly, is mindset and recognizing this is a future avenue of business. Once we get past that, we're talking about using the skills you've already learnt and just picking up a few data skills along the way, or enabling some of your team to have those data skills, and you piggyback on the knowledge that they've acquired to service your clients. Like, I don't suggest that everyone becomes a Power BI expert.
Mhm.
Just the same way as I don't say that everyone should become an Excel expert. But what I would love to do is every one of us have got that person in the office who's that Excel expert, right? Who, at the moment we've got an Excel problem that just becomes too tough, we pick up the phone and say, hey, Boyd, how do I solve this problem?
Mhm.
What I would love to see is that we end up with the same thing for Power BI in firms, that we've got that resident expert that sits there, and there might be multiple experts.
I think that's almost essential to have someone that has grasped at least the basics of Power BI, DAX, and the data model. Without understanding the basics of how it comes together, I think you're going to throw money at something and burn a lot of money just throwing resources at it and throwing subscription costs at it. Got to have at least someone in the firm that really understands it and will be able to drive it.
What you probably need is a bit of a healthy suspicion of the numbers and the ability to interrogate whoever's producing these reports for you to say, okay, what's the basis for this? Where are these numbers coming from? Is the measure that we're producing based on solid facts, or is it, because the one thing about data analytics, I guess, is that you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So, and whoever's producing your reports should be looking for that. But if they're not, then certainly, or things could be missed, or they're just trying to hit a deadline, right? And so everyone makes mistakes. A healthy suspicion of whoever's consuming these reports of the numbers to make sure that they're right before they take decision on it is really important. And if the numbers are unfounded for whatever reason, so incomplete timesheets or whatever the case may be, then that's where you need to do a little bit of work with your client to fix up the data entry, okay, and to say, well, actually, we need everyone to put in their timesheets wholly, or to make sure that people are clocking off rather than forgetting to do so and do the next day and resulting in a timesheet that looks like they spent 24 hours on a job, which is wholly unrealistic. So I guess a healthy suspicion of numbers should always be the case. But I think that's a good role for an accountant anyway, in that if you're looking at a number on a profit and loss or a balance sheet, you're probably looking at it saying, does that look right? And if it doesn't look right, then you're going to interrogate the data a little bit, or interrogate whoever prepared that particular set of accounts a little bit. So that's where I think there's maybe a good segue between analytics and accountants, in that they can look at figures, they can understand whether or not it looks reasonable, and then they have that capability for investigation into it. You're right in that it's a different set of numbers, no longer debits and credits. It's KPI based numbers that you're often looking at. Sometimes it's debits and credits as well, because when you're dealing with zero data or mild data or whatever. But yeah.
Correct. It's a good question actually, Cam, because I guess I'm a lot more management orientated. And I think because I've still own 3 or 4 other businesses, or have an equity interest in them, you actually know what information you actually do require. And it's not always just the straight financials. You need to be able to, analyze stuff and look at different things. So I guess the Power BI is really, the only limiting factor is your imagination.
Yeah.
and what you connect things with.
Mhm.
And I'll give you some examples of that as well. What we're doing, we do a large amount of builders, and we're actually working out cost per square meter for builders and sales price and all that type of stuff to get a bit of a trend.
Mhm.
Now, this is actually coming at a zero. Now, most people wouldn't have even thought you could do that, but it is possible.
What about client base? How important is a client base to go down a path like this? I mean, do you need a size? Like, I mean, obviously we can't have individual tax return payers here, but do we need to have sort of the larger size businesses that really take this by the horn and appreciate it more?
I think there's value in the smaller clients as well. And you need to be conscious of when you're building reports for clients of how big they are. And you also need to be conscious of how much value you can provide a client that is a smaller client. So, what data is in their Xero file that is of value to them, all right? And therefore, how much can you charge a small client, all right? And then when you get into your bigger clients that are your, multi-entity consolidated groups, that's certainly where you're going to see more value on both sides of the equation. Clients are going to really appreciate it, all right, because they're able to do things that they've not been able to do before. Equally, they're going to be willing to pay for it.
Good question. I don't think so. I don't think there's a size limit. I think, to give a practical example to that, actually, we have had people who have had a dry cleaning service on this. So we're talking 5 or 6 employees, right? Not turning over massive amounts of dollars, but it's a tough space to be in, a dry cleaning service at the moment. There's not big dollars, margins are slim. We've got a lot of expensive equipment to pay to maintain, and there's less and less people engaging in dry cleaning and washing services, certainly in the regional area that this is in. However, they still need assistance. They still need to understand their numbers. They still need to understand how to drive their business model, how to make it, which target customers to target, which things to improve. And it's not about the size of the business or even the affordability of the service, that they can afford that because they need to, right? So if they're not making money and they need to make money, and you need this information to tell them how to make money, then it's kind of a necessary component here. Now, you could spend ages mucking about with Excel or exported reports and have to do this every month. Or you could spend a little bit of time investing in setting up a recurring template, and then you don't have to do that additional work all the time. So it's really, Power BI is 2 things. One, it's a very cool thing to be able to drill down to the numbers and to get the information. And when you see something that looks a little bit odd, to be able to work out, well, tell us more about that oddity, so to speak. And it shows you in a really visual and quick and simple way. And that's part of the beauty of it, and it enables some really good conversations, but that Excel can't really do. You can, create a pretty pie graph, but that's about it.
Yeah, so we do a bit of I'll take a step back. We do a bit of a screening process before we'll take on a client. Generally now, from now, we do not take on a client unless they're quarterly with us. And everyone that goes quarterly with us, regardless of size, has to go on our Power BI system, our Tony reporting system. So everyone gets it pretty much.
Right.
There's no options. There's no options if you want to work for us. And to be fair, if you just want to come to us just to do your tax, we're not actually interested in your work, because we want to help businesses grow. And that's where Tani sits in behind. What it enables people to do, gives some data. I find accountants are very hard struggle at doing true business advisory. Now, just because you have for want of a better example, a spotlight report doesn't make you a business advisor. It's the information that you supply or advice you give on top of what comes out of that financial information. So if you build some pretty good systems which help you find the information that the client needs, it makes you a better advisor naturally. And over time, you just get better at it.
Which circles back to your initial comment, just as well as a Tiny. A Tiny's just a tool.
Yep.
You're only as good as how well you use that tool.
Yep. And it's interesting, mate. Sometimes I can have a meeting, so we break our costings into different categories, and if all the margins are right at the high level, we actually don't even look at the detail. And we talk about strategy and other things. So it's almost like a bit of a checklist. Oh, the figures are great, margins we expect, the wage percentage we expect. Okay, what's next? they don't go into the detail. I mean, you got to be careful as an accountant. You can go into too much detail.
Mhm.
So yeah, but that's not as easy as it sounds to do all that type of stuff. And the reason being is obviously we use a tone at the front end to control it, which part of the or which employee gets what report, which is pretty important. You can PDF stuff, but the biggest thing is that we don't have to build out a lot of the integrations. It's all there. All we have to do is actually do the visualizations, and that saves a massive amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, so
But it's been like-
the centralization of the data in a database that you can just have feeding into the reports.
Well, it does make me smile, mate. When I go to your websites every so often, I see all these new programs that you integrate with, and half the ones I suggested, they can, like, we want to integrate this with Xero and this into a tiny, like SimPro and little exact harvest and different things. I just start smiling because my team can't do that. They can build the visualizations and do the Power BI from that point of view, link different fields, but they can't actually do the API stuff, if that makes sense. That's worth its weight in gold.
Sorry.
And look, I know what I want out of Power BI. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I'd get amazed by it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, again, I'm lucky I've got descendants and some other people that can do this type of stuff, but it's fantastic.
What about the fact that accountants, when they get such a beast, such a flexible beast like this, is there a lack of vision here on where to drive it?
It depends on the firm. It depends on the person. Yeah, lack of vision, lack of understanding as well. Like, it probably goes back to that first point. Like, if you don't understand the data and how where it comes from and what you can do with it, and then equally you don't understand the visualizations even and know how you can represent that data, then you get a struggle. But so it's a combination of different things.
I think there's almost two parts to that question, so I'll divide and conquer, if you will. So in terms of the vision part of it, I think, if you have a passion, and if your passion is to improve the condition of a small business owner, if you want to help them build their business, then this is a good space for you. This is something that will really help support that work. If your passion is not in that, and that's okay to be as well, you're still, just to be clear, compliance is still a valuable service. Tax advisory is still a very valuable service. And if that's the way that you want to help improve your business owners' lives, then that's great. You should continue to do that. But if you're looking at the management consulting area in particular, then it needs this information to be able to make good informed decisions. So I think that's maybe the splitting the hair and the vision there, is that if you're looking for a slightly better compliance report, then it's maybe not the way that you want to go. If you're looking at this is obviously our opinion as well. People feel free to disagree with us. But if you're looking for that ability to delve a little bit deeper and find out the why of things, or what's going well, what's not going well, then that's really where analytics can support that vision for your customers and clients. And then the other thing, I guess, is, do they need to understand analytics? Well, they need to understand what the data is telling them. If you're the person in the room with the client talking to them about these reports, then you're going to need to understand what the report is telling you and what metrics that you want to be focusing on. And also, I guess, understand that measuring the wrong things or measuring certain things can have unintended consequences. So, for example, we're talking to a medical practice recently, actually, who were looking to put in a bonus scheme for one of their practitioners, basically. And so they were thinking, well, if they improve this ratio number, the number of times that a particular customer will come back on average per year to be this number instead, then we'll give them a bonus. And we noted, well, you could improve that number by actually just seeing less people and less appointments and improve that number. So be careful what sort of encouragement you want to offer on different figures, because there's ways to either game or cheese the system, or where you will have unintended kind of consequences for doing getting people back more regularly would mean that we perhaps can't charge them as much as well. So understanding which numbers to track is important. But as far as the actual know-how on how to produce the reports, etc., I don't think that's really necessary for someone at the director or partner level to really get involved in. This is why you employ people. Now, you can if you want to, of course, if that's what your interest is as well. But certainly with no aspersions to my director whatsoever, if I told him to produce a Power BI report, it would be utterly lost. It would be a real problem for him. But he doesn't need to understand how to produce it. All he needs to understand is that the data is sound and that the KPIs that need to be produced for a particular business.
Let's just move away from that area now. I wanted to move into, the reason I bring this up is that because I do so many live demonstrations and I talk to so many accountants, and they either ask me directly or they think it in their head and go off and do their own research. And that in their head is basically this: Microsoft Power BI is a standalone product that when you go to their website, it says $13.70 a month for a Power BI Pro account. Why do we need Atani? Why would we use Atani?
Cool, mate. Really, really good question. And for those listening at home, PT 2.0 actually started with Power BI long before I met Cam. Okay. And, we were on our Power BI journey. We were developing solutions. We were developing connectors. Life was good. Okay. But we didn't know life could be better. And what I mean by that is that a lot of our early clients, we were having to build everything from ground up, client by client. So we spent huge amounts of time building connectors, building other ways to bring data into a data warehouse. And because we are not a Microsoft accredited developer, we would build it in their own environments, which would mean we'd have to build it each time. Now, where we've got something like Atani, and can I say now is that probably 80 to 90% of our clients actually sit in Atani as that base platform, is there were some major key advantages to it. Number one, the cost to implement significantly reduced. The time to execute significantly reduced. The ability for someone else to manage the infrastructure, the security, everything else like that is now something that we don't need to worry about at all. And just the sheer ability to access so many different programs and applications so quickly means that you can spin up a solution in minutes as opposed to weeks or months that we have with where we build a solution without Atani. So look, we still have clients who build things independently, but what we do is that when we are talking to our clients is we give them alternatives. Here's the option with Atani, here's the option without. And I would say that probably only 1 out of 100 then go and say, let's do it without Atani, because quite literally we'd add 2 months to a project and tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do it. So that's why I'd say what Atani is it possible to do it without Atani? Absolutely. But do you want to grow old getting a solution?
I think Atani just helps make it a more of a turnkey solution. It's more of a turnkey solution to the data, accessing the data and connecting to the data. And then obviously the data model that sits over the top. So it provides, I guess, the turnkey abilities there, and it gives you a starting point. It gives you the starting point by the templates. Without the starting point, in fact, the starting points provide, the templates provide a lot of the learning when you're doing that initial training as to what is actually possible here to create for a client.
So the reason why you would use Atani is because Power BI is a product that's designed to connect to multiple data platforms, right? Multiple data sources. So you can connect it to a SQL data source or an OData feed or SharePoint or Microsoft Dynamics, or there's a whole heap of other things. The problem is that not all of those data sources are readily available for Power BI to effectively connect to. So let's take Xero as an example, because it's one that most accountants will be familiar with here in Australia. Xero has this wonderful API. It's incredible. Pretty much, good 90 to 95% of the data sitting in Xero is available to export out through the API. However, Power BI, when it wants to connect to an API, it wants all the data now. It rushes through it. It's kind of like it's sending a fire hose of queries to the Xero API. And Xero, quite rightly, say, well, no, we're not going to take that many queries at once and respond to it, because otherwise our computers get overwhelmed and they have a meltdown and it knocks the entire API offline. So what you actually need is this structured approach to grab the data over a period of time where you're throttling the amount of queries being sent through. You're grabbing the data, you're storing it, and you're only from there only grabbing the updated information, so that you're only grabbing what's new, what's changed, which is a much more efficient process. And then obviously that's how Xero wants people to approach this when they're doing data mining out of the Xero files. So if you're looking at trying to connect Power BI directly to Xero, it won't happen. And for those who are Googling right now, or Googling after this, and saying, but there's a Xero Microsoft connector sort of thing. Yeah, you don't get the data. You get a few canned reports that are, pretty but useless.
Oh, they don't have that anymore. That's gone.
That's gone. Okay. So even if you saw historical reference to it, then it's not the same, basically. Whereas in the Tiny situation, they're connecting to the data, they're grabbing the data, they're storing it in a data warehouse that is readily available for that fire hose approach, so to speak, that Power BI wants to use. So it can grab the data, it can do the whole data set refresh, and then you've got everything that you need to then base your analytics on, to have this ready-made model as well, which is a great model based off of the Xero sort of stuff. It's all there ready to work with. You don't need to do additional work from there. And then there's also a series of, available templates that Tiny has that you can use to deploy if what you're looking for is particular ratios or P&Ls or balance sheets or that sort of thing. Then you've got that readily available. So you've got kind of this shortening of the wait. So if you're an accounting firm trying to do that yourself, then you're going to need a coder. You're going to need to run your own data warehouse. And by coder, I mean not someone who's familiar with Power BI, but rather with a different set of code entirely. So not talking DAX, not talking M, we're talking SQL and probably JSON, I'm guessing, probably some C#. And that's really additional overheads for you. Whereas if you want to kind of quickly get into this space, then it makes a lot more sense to go with a platformer like Tiny to grab that data. And then you've also got it readily available for other data sources. So I've been talking Xero, but then there's, how many other integrations are there available at the moment? There's 40, 50?
Yeah, 30 or 40 now, yeah.
30 or 40. So 30, 40 other commonly used platforms within the Xero ecosystem, or the MyOB ecosystem where it's applicable as well, that you've got straight away, as opposed to having to employ someone to build each and every API connection, to store it in your own data warehouse, to then build analytics off. So there's this huge chunk of work that Tiny is doing that means you don't have to do that, or you don't need to invest in those skill sets.
It's almost
So
like your example of a small business owner. Rather than using an accountant, they hire an accountant. Why would you hire an accountant as a small business owner? You get the accountant to do that job for you.
That's an excellent analogy, as in you could hire an in-house accountant, or you can hire an accountant instead. And that's how most of the people watching this video will probably be making money, is because they're the people who are being hired instead of an employee going into the business. So it makes a lot more sense to leverage off what's already available. And for us, that's what we did. Our main kicker for engaging with Tiny was a connection to a data source called Simpro, which was so hard to find anyone who could do it, and do it in a credible way as well, as if the data made sense, as opposed to you trying to reconcile back to a second Simpro and a report. It just didn't make sense whatsoever from other providers that we tried. So that was our kind of kicker, and then we've moved on to other data sources from there because they've been incredibly useful for us.
Do you want to just make some comments on pricing?
Pricing is, and I'm not surprised you get lots of questions around pricing, because I reckon pricing in data analysis services, reporting advisory services, is difficult because people aren't used to it. They don't know what value is. The problem is that for a lot of firms, we've always worked out value by time to produce, right? Now what we're talking about is okay, there is time to produce a template to upskill, things like that. But potentially the value is far greater than the input. So how am I actually going to price this thing together? And I'm just going to draw a distinction there between bespoke projects and then some of the more organized kind of delivery to clients. I'm a big believer around where we've got a template, like say a Xero template for clients that we've produced to go across the firm, is that I think that there's this tendency to try and give it away to a degree, which I'm not a massive fan. I think that there is a lot there that actually delivers consistent value. So in those kind of circumstances, I say, hey, connect your template to an advisory service and then put a price on that. Now, some firms I know that price can be, well, there's a lot of firms I know that give it away, stop it, but some go, hey, here's $50 a month for this template, or others go up to $500 a month. I think that pricing is more correlated with the advice and the conversations that you're having than recovering your investment in there. And we see that with some firms, that very much that the templates are the talking point, the value to the clients, the advisory. Okay, so use that where we've got it templatized. Where we talk then about more specific things for clients, where we're building something bespoke for a client, I think that it gets a lot harder for people to try and talk about how we're going to price this. Like, I've got resources and everything else like that. There's no silver bullet for that. I think that a lot of it from our experience is coming together with the client, once again, working out the value and then working out the cost of it. More and more, we tend to move to more monthly or regular recurring type payments rather than once-off project costs. Number one, to obviously reduce that initial burden to get it across the line for the client. But I think there's also this propensity that as we start doing more of it, that we still consider it, what's the WIP cost of developing? And more as we move into this, there is less WIP that is identifiable to an individual project and more that is framework type cost. So for most of our projects, we have a look at, okay, what would be the WIP cost plus what would be the framework cost that we've got in there as well when we start talking about pricing? And then what's the value on it? Like, is it then going to be surrounded by an advisory service? So, for some firms, we sit down there and we spend a day a month where we're doing data discovery. Okay, where we're telling them what they didn't know about what they don't know and things like that. So when it comes into it, I still go and say, hey, even with the project ones, work out where that's going to sit in the organization, and especially as people move into data analysis. It's not, these things are generally not one project. Like, once we open up the box, it actually turns into, well, I'm starting here. And then I actually want the next piece, which is the challenge for most firms, I find, because what we do generally is we start with financials. Okay, it's comfortable, it's easy, it's exact. We know if we're right or not. Okay, if it doesn't balance, we're wrong. If it does, we're right. So that there's this black and white that comes in with financial analysis. However, for most businesses we deal with, that's probably only 30% of the pie that they actually want to look at. The operational type reporting is actually much more important to day-to-day operations. And people don't like me saying this, but financials are outcomes. Operational is drivers. Okay, so the more we can get into operational reporting as accountants, the actually better off we're going to be. However, it gets murkier. Like, we're not experts in operational, right? So there's this bit of this propensity to financial only, and that's what we are trying to personally change with our clients, is to actually go and say, hey, we've got a specific specialization in an industry. So let's say it's manufacturing. It's now about getting the data team to work with the accountants who specialize in an industry and start getting that knowledge out of people's heads. So one of the things that I always do, and pandemic's made this hard, but we always try and do, is, for instance, a walk around. Okay, go and visit a client, walk around, try to start understanding what's going on. Bring other members of your team with you as you go. Understand the client. Because personally, I think that to be successful long term, I think we are going to need to analyze, reconstruct, and report on operational data to a greater extent than we do financial data. Financial data is a good place to start, though. Don't get me wrong. It's a great place to learn your skills because it is exacting. Operational data, you're not going to know necessarily unless you walk the floor and understand and collate all the other data together. But to me, from running accounting firms and engineering firms and things like that, that operational data is massive, but harder to price, harder for people to understand and put a value on. And that's why I go and say, well, this is where we start with friendly clients who want an outcome, who you're going to learn with at the same time to understand an industry, but bringing in multiple members of your team. Number one, you're going to learn from them. Secondly, they're going to learn some of these tools. Thirdly, they're going to be looking for opportunities, right? So they're next in that same vertical when we go and say, well, actually, we can come up with a closing WIP figure that is segmented by product category, product group automatically, applies to a lot more customers than the one that we're currently doing pricing for. So I guess what I'm saying is involve everyone, because you'd be amazed what you can learn.
Yes, it's probably not. I'd say it's not our strong point, but it's probably something that we've really taken Atami and Power BI and utilized it as our replacement or as our reporting function, if you like. So I won't sit here and go, we're charging a fortune to lots of people to provide them with Power BI reports. I actually more look at it as a real selling tool for us. And it is the service offering that has really helped us land some of the biggest clients that we have in the firm. So can I sit here and go, we charge this much per month to produce a Power BI report for this client? Not really. Can I tell you that having the ability to produce consolidated reports and reports that allow a multi-entity business with, say, 10 different entities, the ability to compare data across all those entities has landed us, clients worth $100,000 a year to the firm. We have been able to do that.
So are you trying to suggest that you've been most successful in the consolidated space on winning business, or has it also been sort of the operational data that's helped as well, the operational connectors?
It has not been the operational data for us at the moment. That's probably been a space that we haven't done as much in that we would like to have done in, and we need to do more, but also we still need to sort out our consolidated and financial data and financial reporting for people as well.
Yeah.
I think what we haven't done is play to the strengths of what Power BI is, and that's, I was going to give someone advice around, what to build in Atani. It would be play to the strengths of what the system of what Power BI, I should say, is there to provide. And it's data visualization. It's not tables upon tables upon tables of data.
The reason is your business model looks roughly like this, which you could probably analyze just by getting a few reports and that sort of thing, and say, in order for you to grow, we need you to monitor these numbers. If you monitor these numbers, there's a $20,000 or $50,000 upside to you, because if you see them, you'll be able to push them, you'll be able to make changes, you'll be able to make informed decisions. And you can't tell me that that's not worth something to someone. In fact, it's worth $20,000 or $50,000 to them. Mm-hmm. Now, you might not charge that much, but if you say, if we can get a $50,000 upside here, and we sell this custom work to you for $5,000 or $10,000 or a subscription service or whatever the case may be, then it's an easier conversation. So if you're talking to the client about, selling to this on an hourly pricing basis, or saying, it's a lot of custom work, it'll be, $10,000 upfront fee, and they're sitting and they're not hearing about how it's going to help them or what it's going to mean to them and their personal fortune. Because often we're talking about that with small businesses. It's them personally. It's bread on the table for them. It's real. It's not like larger businesses where they, have a budget. They're all employees of the business. there's a group of shareholders that they never meet or can't possibly personally know. And so it's kind of, okay, we're happy to spend that money because it's not really ours. But for a small business, it's always personal to them. So you've got to talk personally the upside to them for these sort of analytics. So I agree that it can be hard, but if you don't sell it in the right way, then that's kind of the reason why it is hard. You've got to put in the upside for this. So I think there's demand, I think there's need, and I think there's value. And if you have those three things, then you have a product that you can sell.
Does it make you nervous that you get into a situation where you say, oh, it's going to be, it's going to offer you, 20 grand, like you said, 20 grand or 30 grand of value by doing this? But then is there a nervous aspect to that you may overpromise and underdeliver because then you're like, what if I'm wrong? And they don't actually see a bump in their money, in their revenue. I mean, then do you not charge them,
Absolutely. I can understand where if you're making those sort of promises, you've got to have a reason for that. So for us, historically, what we've done is that we would have done prior to this some kind of analytics on their business model already. So we might have their profit and loss, for example, for the last 3 years. We'll get some, let's say it's a trades business for the sake of argument. We'll get how many paid hours they've had for those years in question. So how many paid productive hours. We will have worked out how do they charge. So it's usually an hourly rate plus a markup is the standard within the trades industry. It's pretty standard, and it's usually a percentage of markup and an hourly rate that they'll charge out for their employees. And then we'll work backwards basically to say, okay, you've paid this many hours and you've charged out based on your markup and your sales, you've charged out X amount of hours. And it's usually, it's always lower than the paid hours. And it's been anywhere between, we've seen a productivity as low as 46% of those hours actually being charged out, as high as, maybe about 70, which is probably where about in the ballpark of where you want to be because of annual leave and long service, sick leave, and so on and so forth. So from there, we say, well, what if? It's a classic kind of modeling situation where you can do this in Excel, and that's what we do it in. There's no need for Power BI in this process, and therefore no need for that big hurdle to jump, where we say, well, what if you can improve these figures marginally even? So even just a couple of dollars charged out per hour difference or gross profit per hour, it makes a huge change to the business or an increase in productivity. But these are numbers that you don't see in a profit and loss, that you don't see anywhere else, or that the business owner might have in the back of the head, no, I charge them out, I do this all the time, but the actual financials tell a different story. So what might actually be happening is that everyone's busy, but we're not actually recovering all those hours in fees, be it because of their fixed price work or because, if it's a plumbers and the plumbers are coming back to the office all the time to talk to the office people and not actually going from job to job, which was a real thing. That's based off a real story. And, these are the sort of things that you can immediately identify and prove, but you don't really know about it until you start looking at some of the analytics. You can't specify it. Some of it, the business owner will say, oh, it could have been because of this, etc. And it's gut filling, and you can get a certain way there. But I guess those upsides, or that process that we do to say, all right, what's this going to look like? If, is there room for improvement here first, makes us very confident to say, well, there is this $20,000 or $50,000 upside for you. If you can move these numbers, here's a product to help you look at those numbers on a real-time basis. We can send you reports out to you weekly, and so it lands in your inbox. You don't even need to log into the thing. And your focus there is moving the needle. And when people focus on and start seeing these numbers on a regular basis, they start making changes around it. You almost don't need to do anything else, because if people are what gets measured gets managed. So when we I guess promise, if you will, those sort of upsides, we're usually very, very confident. There's always a certain degree that the business owner will still need to take action. They'll need to do something because it's not enough to just see a number in terms of, if you just look at something and ignore it, nothing's going to happen, right? But if people look at it, take action of it, measure the outcome of the action, and keep on, improving on this process, then you can have fantastic results. And we've seen that time and time again. And these sort of analytics programs, I guess, speed up that feedback loop. So if you're talking 10 years ago or 20 years ago when we first started doing this, these programs weren't around. So it'd be laborious work looking at what was happening in Excel usually, and a lot of work to try and do these analytics. Whereas now Power BI is this fantastic time-saving mechanism for us because we can set it up and automatically refresh, and away we go, right? So it's, as well as the visual display of it, means that you can do quick analytics a lot faster, or look into, your suspected hunches, this type of work, maybe I want to look at that and see how it's going, or this particular customer, okay, I can flag up that they're a problem customer a lot quicker than if I did this sort of analytics once a year.
Yeah, but that's not as easy as it sounds to do all that type of stuff. And the reason being is, obviously we use a tone at the front end to control which part of or which employee gets what report, which is pretty important. You can PDF stuff. But the biggest thing is that we don't have to build out a lot of the integrations. It's all there. All we have to do is actually do the visualizations. And that saves a massive amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so the centralization of the data in a database that you can just have feeding into the reports.
Well, it does make me smile, mate. When I go to your websites every so often, I see all these new programs that you integrate with, and half the ones I suggested, we want to integrate this with Xero, this into a tiny like SimPro and General Exact Harvest and different things. I just start smiling because my team can't do that. They can build the visualizations and do the Power BI from that point of view, link different fields, but they can't actually do the API stuff, if that makes sense. That's worth its weight in gold.
Sorry.
And look, I know what I want out of Power BI. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I get amazed by it. I'm just I'm lucky I've got Jacinta and some other people that can do this type of stuff, but it's fantastic.
So then, following on with that, with, upskilling, like you said, those resources, how would you advise firms concerned that the Power BI person walks out, and then you're high and dry?
It's really important, mate. If you think, and you've got to have the right person with the right mindset that wants to do it and fits the mold. And I've been very blessed with Jacinta. That was just, as I said, like a duck to water. So it was easy for her. But I'm sure in most accounting firms, there's someone out there would just eat this up for lunch. Mm-hmm. They would love it. But you got to invest in it. You got to give them the time to train. We've put plenty of training into Jacinta, and she's getting better and better. And it's a journey. You can't say, okay, you got a month to be up to speed. It takes a long time. Mm-hmm. Maybe because we're doing more complicated stuff, I'm not sure, but it does take some time.
Right? Because, one of the big things that we find and what stops people doing it is that the skill is currently scarce. So we have people worried, well, if I lose somebody, what's going to happen? Yeah, I'm going to lose this knowledge. I'm not going to be able to service the clients. Mm-hmm. Well, number one, unless you're a sole trader, don't teach one person. Okay. This is a journey where people can collaborate and learn together. So number one, multiple people. In fact, we run a lot of workshops around Power BI training across Australia, New Zealand, and whenever we run the workshop, we make sure that there's 2, 3, 4 people in there. They don't have to do the full course, but we actually run a session right at the beginning that is for every staff member that talks about what it is, what it can do, what's the applicability to a client. And the reason for that is, number one, create opportunities. Number two, know that there's a new frontier that's emerging in this marketplace. As I said, if you think about it as Excel 2.0, go after it with that same kind of relish that you use Excel with, because it'll serve you down the line. But also have your key contacts around. Like, there's a number of firms, for instance, that we operate as their backup. If somebody goes and they've got a project to get delivered, me and my team step in, pick up the project where it was and help get it finished, right? But I would prefer that you have multiple people trained so that you keep that knowledge in-house and you keep building it. Eventually, Power BI knowledge will become ubiquitous, like Excel knowledge. Until then, yeah, like any business division, you don't have only one person in the organization that can do payroll, right? Same kind of thing. Set your team up, set them up so that you've got multiple people being trained.
And I mean, this is like a common fear that I get through directors and partners is that they think, well, I don't know how to do it. I did a couple of little courses, but I'm not driving the Power BI engine. What if my star leaves me and I'm building up this recurring revenue stream? I'm relying on it so heavily every day goes past. What if they leave? You know, this fear that, and they're actually thinking this before they start, if they get down that journey. And so what you're saying really is that, one, have a backup like yourself to get that interim period out of trouble, but also the ship goes on, like the show goes on.
Correct.
Like if that means that you have to tell your client, look, we're not running any development over the next month. Well, that's just the way it is.
Correct. And, a bit the same if you have someone who has an accident or anything else like that. Yeah. The best way to survive, in your risk register, multiple people, or know that there's resources out there that can step in, but be honest with your client and just have what your strategy is set, and you'll end up with multiple people because it will become something. And look, the other thing is, this kind of stuff's also a bit sexy, right? It's very cool. And I think you'd be surprised at how many people actually want to learn this kind of stuff if given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I think that what we think is we think about the person in the organization that is in IT or something like that. And if I can, for just 30 seconds, just go and say, who's the right person in an organization to do this kind of stuff? It's someone, to me, it is someone who is an intermediate to senior kind of person who wants to learn. Okay. This is not Power BI. If you want to grow as a service in your firm, is not an IT function. Okay. It's an advisory function that uses technology to achieve. So we see firms go and implement Power BI. And I'm not saying that IT shouldn't be involved. I think that every division should be involved and should learn, because there are some massive, massive advantages to IT services internally to measure and leverage if you get the IT team up to speed as well. But what I'm saying is, if you're offering a data advisory service to clients, is you need people who are able to talk, communicate, and advise clients. So I always say, hey, pick someone who's senior or intermediate who likes technology. They don't need to know how to program. They don't need to do all of that kind of stuff. I say, hey, if there's a partner there that wants to learn it, awesome. Just know that you're never going to have the time to get into the guts of it, but learn enough so that you can help the others out into it. Even for myself, I've got a technical team now that sits around me that I don't get into Power BI as often as I used to. And some of the team actively discourage me occasionally, but I still am in there enough to know so that when it comes back to, well, Dan, how should I best present this to the client? How should I actually design this? They're the kinds of questions that I'm getting involved with, not, hey, what's the DAX to do this measure? All right. And so that's probably a pretty important thing, is every firm where we've seen the partner go and say, I'm going to do it, it never tends to leave them from the organization. So the organization doesn't leverage it. And generally it then gets stuck in providing internal services only. Where, as I said, the biggest play for this is with your clients.
Because you will be in trouble temporarily. Like you will, that's just reality. You're not going to have a backup person because they're not a cheap resource to have, whether they're here in Australia or they're in the Philippines or wherever in the world. Doesn't matter. The cost of those resources is becoming more expensive, but you'll find someone else, just as you always do for every role, just another role in a business. And there's lots of data visualization people out there, and there's going to be even out there, it's like anything negative that happens in your life or in your, business world, you can look at it positive or negative. So try and look at it as a positive. If you've got someone young in your firm that you can afford to have, fill the hole for a month, and they use it as a learning experience to understand Tani and Power BI better, then do that. If you need to just tell your clients for a month or two, sorry, like our reporting function is down for next month.
They're definitely a concern for me because I've only got the one plus a couple of outsourced type people. So we will try and find someone else to put on at some point. I'm very fortunate. We've got a pretty good working relationship with PT2, so they'll help us out. But yeah, we want to have more than one. So I'm hoping by over the next 12 months, we have 3 people working in this space, if not more, because I see it's part of our future. As Xero becomes more automated, does more of the accountants type work, we want to be in helping businesses grow, etc. And I still believe that people we're going to employ in the future, that's where they're going to want to work. Accountants, there's less of them out there. No one can get accountants to come and work for their firm. So it's not a very attractive industry. So at least if you do, working on businesses, helping grow and identifying trends, for me, it's much more fun work. So if it's fun for me, it's got to be fun for the new people coming through.
Do you see a movement here with firms going towards different niches operationally now? Because I'm just seeing a theme happening is, we're looking at Build Exact. I mean, our area is going to be built, or we're going to be doing Square and really hammer hospitality. Do you see this as the next frontier, is to not just put that you niche on your website, but actually niche, like where you understand the operational drivers of a business in areas?
I think that the selection of a niche also varies with the size of the business as well. So, what we then end up with in some of our larger clients where they've got a couple of hundred staff is departments with niches. So, but I think a niche is a very powerful thing, and not just for Power BI reporting, but I think it's a powerful thing for firms as a whole as well. What Power BI at Tani can do is actually accelerate. Look at exponential growth. We're seeing more and more that firms are going into this. We got a call the other day from a firm who had 200 pubs that they want to benchmark. Okay. What better place to do that than starting to look at it inside Power BI, bringing them all together to start benchmarking. We're seeing a lot of firms not having one vertical, but maybe having 2 or 3 in there. And look, we've got a lot of generalist firms out there, and I'm not saying that generalist is bad. I just think that as we start moving to operational type reporting, having that background knowledge can be very powerful in this space. Or what firms need to do is they actually need to have a third party join on with them in the journey. So say you're targeting agricultural clients, having someone who is an expert in ag joining in to that journey as well. But then obviously that reduces flexibility to a degree at the same time. So I think we understand. I think we're seeing teams that are specializing in firms. And I certainly see firms that are laser focused on particular niches, especially around building, construction, hospitality. Retail seems to be the biggest areas where we just have firms that say, no, for us to be a master in this area, we need to be laser focused. But like with all firms, you're not going to turn a family group that has construction but also has another business type. You're still going to try and look after the whole client, right? So we're not saying that everyone's only 100% dedicated to that niche, but there's this mindset, there's this prerogative to be able to focus.
I think it'll be extremely important over the next 5 years. It'll be what I think probably 5 years ago, we thought it was going to be really important in 5 years' time. And I still think there's a way to go. I look at our clients, I go, well, we're not really doing any operational reporting for people when we need to be. And then I look at what some other firms are doing around forecasting and how it can all actually come together. How do you forecast a profit and loss and therefore a 3-way balance sheet cash flow if you don't have some insight into their operational data? You're just pulling numbers out of your ass. Like, you really are. People are just, what do you think your sales are going to be in next month? And the business might know, all right? The business owner will probably have their finger on that. What do you think your income's going to be in 12 months' time? Or in 3 months' time? They're going to be guessing. But if you can get into the operational data and actually see what is in the pipeline, and look at the client we work with does the retaining walls, all right, we could actually use their operational data and we'd be actually able to see what they have built up in jobs that they have won that they have not yet started, right? And we would be able to see what their forecast revenue should be for at least the next quarter, because they'd typically be carrying at least a quarter of revenue in jobs that they haven't started yet.
So what's the hold up? Is it that you are just too busy to transition at this point in time? Like, speaking as a whole, accounting, I mean, you just got so much work on the go that you haven't been able to work on it, or is it the fact that businesses are still, that transition to the cloud operationally is, you know, obviously we're at a higher percentage now with Xero, like financial data, but that movement to operational is still slow and lagging behind.
It's probably multifaceted, I guess. Yes, we're super busy just getting on board new clients into, you know, our team, which takes up heaps of my time. Existing client work takes up a lot of my time. Then, yep, not as many businesses as you think are on a cloud operational system. Still a lot out there that are not. And then, to be honest, I think one of the biggest killers is the quality of the data in operational systems. I think those that I have connected to, I quite quickly look at and go, your data here is all over the place. You're not using the system correctly. You know, they're all limiting factors in terms of how much you're going to be able to do in that space.
Yep, that makes sense.
But having said that, by being able to connect to those systems and show a client that, all right, for example, an engineering firm that we're about to connect to their workflow maps, I can guarantee that it's going to drive improvement to their data. All right. So, you know, if you put a report in front of a manager or even an employee that tells them your timesheets aren't in for the last month, you know, eventually that's going to drive people to improve that.
Yeah.
We can't see where our business is going or what our performance is doing operationally if the data's not in there. So I think there's good value there for clients to improve their data by having it presented in front of them visually that the data's not good enough.
Yeah, sure. This is a big area that everyone's interested in as well. What to charge, how much do we charge, how do you do it, how do you convince people to be on these sort of fees? And it's been an area where we've been, I guess, a little bit different from the accounting industry for quite some time, where for a long time we've had compliance clients who might be paying $3,000 or $5,000 a year for in compliance fees to $30,000 or $40,000 a year fees. And these, again, are small business owners. So even before Power BI, so 10 years ago, let's say when I was first joining Unicorn, then we'd have people come to us saying, we'd like to see if you could do our accounting. We say, why? And they said, our accountant's not is too expensive. You know, they charge us too much. And after a few questions, it turned out that it's not about the accountant charging too much, but rather they weren't seeing any kind of value from what they were getting from their accountant, because it was always reactive. They'd never be able to get them on the phone. Every time they picked them up on the phone, they'd be started to be charged in 6-minute increments. So it was always kind of an investment decision to call them, and so on and so forth. So we'd pick up these clients, be charging them more, and then also be picking up additional services for what they actually needed. And what they typically needed was that advisory service. And often also they didn't really know that they needed it, in terms of they weren't looking for a business coach per se, or they weren't looking to do a strategic planning day. But after, you know, 1 or 2 meetings with us, then they would walk out saying, this is exactly what I need. This is what I've been searching for. Someone to help me with my business, someone to help me grow my business. So back into the Power BI space in terms of pricing for that, then I see it as being, you've got kind of 3 big options here. So you'll have some clients who want to be able to, and these are typically your larger ones, who want to be able to purchase reports, make it their own, and then go their own way from there. So that's probably a one-off sort of fee where you're selling the development of that report, or even if you've already developed it, you're essentially selling your IP to them. And then they might take up the right subscription to Atani to make it work, and so on and so forth, because they don't particularly want to be bound or have a reliance on your own business or be locked into something along those lines. So occasionally we get people like that. We also do some work where the data is not necessary to go through Atani, I guess, where for example, there's a not-for-profit we're working with at the moment who is using Microsoft Dynamics, and the data is readily available in Dataverse. So that's a once-off fee for us to develop the reports, provide it to them, and then maybe some ongoing fees afterwards for support and, if they need things changed, that sort of thing. In terms of if you're looking at the Atani model, though, then there's two ways that we prefer to do it. The first way, the traditional way that we've been doing it, is that we often see there's a need for our consulting services along with the data analytics. So it's kind of packaged up to say, we're going to produce these reports for you, but we're also going to be producing a budget and producing actual budget for that. We're also going to be helping you with your own pricing strategies, your marketing strategies, people, culture, environment, processes and systems or technological systems, putting that in place as your vision and your overall strategy. So there's a whole suite of consulting services where the analytics is kind of packaged into that. And then should the consulting services run its course, so we set out what we achieve to do, often what's happening now is that those clients will say, well, we still want to get these reports, at which point it's moved off to a subscription service. So essentially, we're paying our fees to Atani, and then we're on-selling the service or the reports that we've built for our clients on a monthly model. And so in that, they get access to the reports. They might still get, they do still get reports emailed out to them on a regular basis. And we support those reports. So if something should go wrong, so occasionally our clients might do something weird in the data and it blips out, or there's an API outage and for whatever reason, there's a chunk of data missing, then we're providing support and interference to investigate, see what's going wrong and fix it so that, everything continues to function well without them having to have their own expertise in Power BI again. So you've got this outsourcing sort of service for their reports that they've become used to, that they're relying on, that would otherwise take them half a day, a week to produce. No kidding there as well, literally half a day of someone's job. And so it's a lot more cost effective for the small business owner then to have those people redeployed to be doing other work. And then, and that solves some opportunity costs for them as well. So yeah, I guess pricing wise, I would be saying package it into other services would be a good way of doing it it's an effective way of doing it. We can definitely say that it works. And that does require some kind of interest, I guess, in the management consulting sort of space or the business coaching sort of space, or you can package it into a monthly sort of subscription fee. And that also works quite well and takes very little resistance as well.
Sure. Okay.
I don't know what other accountants have said there as well, Cameron.
I think most have been very pro recurring, looking for all options need to lead to a recurring ending, even if there's a lot of work up front, has been basically their comment.
Actually, what I'll touch on there as well is, because I think you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, is work in progress. Is this I guess thing where you're looking at doing the development for these reports and you're seeing a big work in progress that you might want to be able to fill out, or you're thinking, well, is this going to be worthwhile over the lifespan of the customer and that sort of thing as well. So the way that we're approaching work in progress is, okay, the development work is necessary to produce these reports for these particular types of clients. However, the work in progress, while it might be necessary for your first client, you're also eating that WIP for your second and your third and your fourth and your fifth. So that that actually is spread across multiple clients, and then it's a game of scaling rather than it is a game of doing custom work for individual clients. Sure, you might need to change a few things here and there per client. There's, small tweaks between different businesses that are in the same sort of industry that they might want to see slightly different numbers, or you need to do something to work out who's the productive labor workforce or something along those lines on the report. But usually that's really minor sort of stuff. So once you've developed your initial sort of templates, you're looking more along the lines of that sort of silver bullet sort of area where you've done a whole heap of the work. So you've developed a product instead of I guess that's the way to think about it, developing a product instead of.
Great question, actually, because I'm pretty happy with our financial reporting model. We'll only ever tweak it. We're investing heavily now in operational type reporting. Why is that important for us? Well, we run growth clubs each quarter where we get clients in, on strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So our future, this is where our future of our practice wants to be in data analytics and business coaching. And I personally believe they go hand in glove. And if you've got accountants wanting to be business advisors, it's a big gap to go from just being an accountant over to be a business coach or advisor. And I think you can use the data and analytics as a segue to get them across that path a lot easier. And I'm testing that model at the moment. I think I'm going to be right.
So the difference there, like how do you find so far in your journey with operational data, like how your clients consume operational data? I mean, I've always said for a while now that CFOs, if they're not offering operational reporting to the board, then they're not really doing their job. But practice, it's slightly different. It's still a lot more management reporting and financial reporting focused.
Yeah, and you got to not fall in that trap too much. So I guess we have a little bit. You've just got to work harder on the operational type data. And where we work, we've got Phil Coombs really helped us on operational type data. He's a guy that's on a very large business called AJ Coombs before he sold it to, I think it was his fellow team members. So he said, these operational reports I used to like on different things. So we went and built it.
Yeah, it's because it's richer and more useful.
And the trickiest one is probably sales forecasting. And we're working with a business at the moment trying to work out how we can do that. So we know when the quotes are won, we can track all that information. It doesn't mean because the quote's won, if it's a 6-month project or a 3-month project, we've got to try and map out when our sales are going to land, because we've still got to, hit our budget for break even and next target for obviously making money. So we need to track the sales forecast pretty closely. And that is a tricky thing to do, I've got to say.
Yep, definitely.
That's what we're working hard on now. So on the job costing thing, we've got that nailed, but on the sales forecasting, we've got some work to do.
Okay. What do you think the difference is between Microsoft Power BI / Atani and Spotlight, Futureleaf, Fathom? What's the difference? Where do they both sit in the market?
Look from our perspective, where we see firms using Power BI, it's the operational imperative, right? We're getting back to areas where Microsoft as a system is constantly increasing and getting access to more data sources. Okay, we've got a software program that's used by hundreds of millions of people, focused on leveraging data from hundreds of thousands of systems. One over time is just going to have access to more data more quickly, more readily than the other. So that's why we've backed the Microsoft Power Platform in there. Look, there's others that we've used Google services and everything else like that, but nothing. Number one for an accounting firm, we're Microsoft houses. Like there are huge parallels to be drawn from Excel and Power BI. Like if you've used Excel, you're not starting from ground zero in Power. Some of the interfacing's the same. DAX is basic DAX is very equivalent to Excel. So you can get started with an if statement or a sum or things like that. So that learning curve has a bit of the edge taken off it. It's also so reliable, like consistency on how information comes in. Yet it's being developed with updates coming out every month. Right, there's new functionality that's being added, and look, just like anything else we use, it gets updated, and occasionally, but very occasionally, the interface gets updated. But like the rest of the Microsoft suite, those changes are subtle and to add functionality, not complete new redesigns each time. So look, I think that it provides a place of comfort in there, and just the market that's getting behind it is just massive. So we've put all our chips into the Microsoft camp nowadays. We're not developing for other systems, and I'm happy with the decision.
Spotlight. I can really only speak into Spotlight, having used it. Look, they've got their place to play in the market for some people, right? That aren't willing to make the investment in both time and money into something like Atani or Power BI. They're very easy to use. They're very templated, but you cannot customize in any way, shape, or form what the end result gets. And they're probably more traditional, and they're probably more comfortable for a client. Client can get their PDF of their report out really easily, and here it is, and we've done no work and we've done no analysis. All right, that's what you can get out of Spotlight. That's fine. And you can also do, forecasting and consolidated forecasting where, I'm still unsure if that's got a space in Power BI or Atani, but maybe it does. So yeah, that's.
So basically you're saying it comes down to flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. You can build, so long as the data's there, you can build whatever you want. All right. Client says, I want to see, we've had this example. I just want to see a report that tells me all my overheads that are over budget so that I can delegate them to specific people that are responsible for those divisions and those departments, and they can know that they are over budget, and they can watch it and see how much they're over budget by, and then, take action accordingly. You can't do that in Spotlight reporting. You'd have to give them their entire profit and loss. You'd have to take a screen grab of those line items, which is horrible. All right. So yeah, customization, ability to make different reports for different purposes, and then different data sources, obviously.
We were heavy users of Spotlight before we went to Atani, and we actually paid money to Spotlight to build our reports off the report codes to get some of the flexibility that we wanted. But the problem is you sit in the meeting and say, look, this is what this quarter was or year to date. You go, oh, what did I do last year? And you'd be fumbling through the different static reports to find that information. So we knew that if we could build a report, we could hit a button on the fly with the client or bring up the exact comparison. You'd get momentum and a much more meaningful conversation. And that's what we were really missing. So, we've got, everyone, large majority of our clients use Xero. So, wouldn't you plug Power BI to get out the reports the clients really need? And it gets even more powerful than that too. And I'll show you in a bit of a demo how we built some custom and supplier reports that no other system really has. And then we can actually pull that down as well. So, and it's actually quite surprising.
Why would you consider Power BI in your accounting firm? Like, why would people who are sort of very foreign to it still? Is this something that you see is getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
Like, Microsoft has moved from selling software licenses. For those of you who were in the early 2000s, Microsoft was all about what licenses could I get on this particular functionality. Nowadays, Microsoft, to me, there's licenses and there's fees to be paid, but it's service first, licensing second. Like, you can get a 60-day trial of Power BI to work out how it's going to work and what you can do with it before you pay a cent, right? Which is different to the times gone by. But I still just think that because it is so familiar with other tools, how it's laid out and things like that, just makes it, just takes that first step, makes the start just that little bit easier.
I guess, how else are you going to do it? I mean, I don't know another way. I mean, there's other data visualization tools, but, other than dumping your data into Excel and creating graphs and visualizations in Excel, which is going to be pretty time consuming, I don't see how else you're going to create the exact look and feel of reports that you want to be able to present both internally and to clients. I haven't seen another solution. So
reason why we considered Power BI in our accounting firm is because we saw analytics as a flat out necessity for our clients. So we saw the development of big data, and we're seeing all this information coming into our clients' operational systems, and we saw it 7 years ago, where there's need for additional reports that the systems themselves didn't produce or required additional information from other systems. And we thought, well, our clients need to see this information. They need to see it in a timely manner for them to make quick, informed decisions. Because if it's too late, then they can't make a change. If it's not accurate or takes a chunk of time to prepare, then it's too expensive for them. So we saw this analytics sort of thing as being, all right, they need this information. It's going to have a big impact on the money that they take home at the end of the day to their families. It is a necessity for us to be involved in this space. So it wasn't really so much of a choice. It was, how are we going to get involved in this sort of reporting? And from there, I guess we knew that there was a chunk of value to be produced, because we were already kind of in that space to begin with. We knew that there was a demand for this information. And then the development of Power BI, Tableau, other reporting systems. So it's not just Power BI, obviously, but we saw this Power BI as, I guess, the friendliest option for us to get involved at the time. And from there, we've developed our skill sets, and we're looking at a Microsoft product that continues to have huge monthly updates. It's actually quite hard to keep up with all the new things that it can do. And so, yeah, as to the why it's a necessity for your clients, it's something that's going to need to happen. And so you're better off jumping on now and positioning yourself as the experts in this field than being a laggard and trying to keep up and hemorrhaging clients as a result.
Good question. I reckon a lot of my clients who come to me already know how they've traded for the year and what the profitability is. So, if I'm not adding value, what's the point of having a meeting? So I use Power BI as a way of adding value. It's part of our value proposition. And then I'm pretty lucky. We look after a lot of large clients, so they're very, very switched on. They don't understand the numbers as well as I do. So it's just getting the numbers out that they want, that they don't know how to get. And sometimes it's like, what's that old saying of Henry Ford? If I asked people what they wanted, they would have wanted a faster horse as opposed to a car. And I think there's a bit of that element in all this.
That's great.